the idea of an unpredictable future is something, obviously more apparent to us than ever before. And the future has always been unpredictable, but we lived in a myth that we knew what was going to happen, and we had a sort of formula for what would be taking people forward. And all you needed to do was do more or less what you were told, and you'd find a way. Now, this is obviously all highly mythical. And what I think's happened from our perspective over the last 12 months is the focus is moving increasingly from knowing and doing to listening and feeling. And so the way to be working forward into the future, I'd argue, is with our multiple senses working in coordination with each other so that we can be as immediate in our responses as possible. In other words, we have to be nimble. And we need to know ourselves. We need to be listening and feeling what's going on with us. We need to be in contact with each other as possible. That's obviously been taken away in some senses through this last 12 months. One of the things that's come up as people have had more space and time to be listening to each other is to become more conscious through things like the power dynamic issues and so on, that we have to be aware of the multiple mixes of people and music, and we can't be focused too singularly on just one or two types of genre. And then the consciousness, as we become very aware that there's so many new nows, and whatever we're told this week is going to happen will be different to next week, and we have to be constantly in the now to be able to make the response. And what I would argue is our curriculum, our approaches, our cultures need to move from hard facts at the core of arts training into the overt acknowledgement of soft skills needing to build. And that within those soft skills, we get the hard facts. So issues like tenacity, self-assurance, empathy, engagement, immersion, and above all, the capacity to dialogue with each other. And through taking those, we can begin to explore what we need to know, and that's how we find our facts. There's nothing new about the fact that the nature of any art is to be on the cusp of future. So we should be wishing to find what to say next. But the problem with that, sorry, can we go back one slide? The problem with that is that we're not necessarily ready yet to articulate fully what we want to say next. There's a very simple way of seeing this. I mean, Beethoven, when he wrote Symphony No. 2, had no idea what was going to be Symphony No. 3. And it's the same through all of history. The concept that listening takes longer. It takes time, not just to think we know, but to hear what's being said. And these concepts of passion, commitment, investing time, giving space to find our curiosities, and then listening to as many different people as possible, not just a teacher, not just a syllabus, but a very much peer-to-peer, recent people just a little step ahead of us in some of our processing. But what we also have to discover is what I've termed here a focused fascination. You have to have some sort of specialization where you're really good. Within YST, we're moving to the idea that the first 2 years will be to explore the landscape of music, and the last 2 years are to begin the journey for you finding yourself and where you fit in best. And as we all know, it's been a period where we're bringing into this is also enhanced awareness of the need for technology. And that's not just, that's obviously audio, visual, online access, and so on. And also, as I say, this element of inclusion, which is, as well as knowing whatever our specialized musical fields are, that we need to be open to everybody else's music. Everybody's into music, and there's no hierarchy of values. And yet we live with a heritage which somehow subconsciously enabled a hierarchy. Now, all of this sounds very theoretical. Hello, next slide. So I wanted to give a very specific example of something from last week. You'll see in the chat that the link to this video is there. It starts at about 11 minutes 30. And I wanted to just give some things in which the landscape changes. One is that it's not just repertoire from 100 years ago. You've got a small ensemble, well, a large ensemble, actually 30 people, creating their own music as connecting points between the main work on the piece, which was the Mother Goose Suite. But also you've got the idea of various roles being played by different people as they discover themselves. The animator of the video, for example, is also the first clarinetist. The narrator of the story is also one of the conductors. The person who oversees our orchestral institute is also the person who wrote the script. And you've got peer-to-peer, you've got peer working with recent alumni, you've got alumni working with international experts as well as faculty. And the idea of the program being curated across the whole event and not just as a series of individual pieces that get put on a menu of possibility. In other words, this is a unique event. And of course, artistic events have always been aspiring to be unique, but we become more and more aware of the conscious of this during this time. As we find ourselves and each other, we need to create the unique moment, which is the next now. And this brings me to a final concept, which is actually that where before, I guess we focused on what somebody might be good at. In other words, they play an instrument well or something, and how that might lead to them getting paid. This Japanese ikigai concept of also trying to give people space to find out what is it they really love, what are they really passionate about. The idea that once you find inside yourself, you're not trying anymore, you're working things forward. But also, as Ming Siew pointed out, and as the survey points out, what does the world actually need? This sense of entitlement that because we've done a lot of work on something, the world should want to come and applaud, is something that also needs to be reconsidered. And I see students becoming more and more passionate with these things. So that reimagining of a culture and community, as well as a curriculum, I think is going to take a lot of continual enabling. But actually, that's what curriculum should be doing. It should not be fixed. It should be constantly responsive to the time. And there's a final slide. This idea that COVID basically, by giving us space to reflect and realize that we can't know or control everything, actually gives us a way forward and an exciting way forward as we sort of ride the journey. And the main thing is that there aren't definite answers to questions, but more that there are artistic stories, and that we each have to find our artistic story as a contribution to each other's existence. The role of artists being to enhance and empower. So just that concept that just flashed on the screen, but can now come fully there again. The next slide. In other words, it becomes more about research experimentation, about finding and strengthening our passions and strengths individually together. And above all, this point of study is only about, it's not about finishing, it's about being ready to start a professional career, and that the professional career will be constantly evolving. And I see that in the three colleagues that are going to be speaking shortly, where I've seen their roles constantly emerging and transforming even in the time I've known them. So there's nothing new in this, except that our focus on what it is, I think, becomes clearer thanks to COVID. Thank you.